Yeah.
You talked about the dissolution of the Israeli war cabinet and said this was an internal matter, but it's not an internal matter if it affects who is in the direct line of decision making over the use of US military assistance and US weapons, particularly in relation to this war. And we know it seems very likely now that the ministers for national security and finance will be a far more significant part of that decision-making process. Does that concern you?
We ultimately judge the decisions that the government of Israel makes, as we do with other governments, on the policy outcomes those decisions produce, not on the people making them. That's true no matter who is in the government. It will continue to be true.
But these are people you've repeatedly criticised for, I think, what you call destabilising rhetoric, for, effectively what are their values. One is a convicted supporter of terrorism. Another has openly called for the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. So if these people are now, in a direct line of decision-making over the war in Gaza, surely that's a concern for you.
So those are people who have always been in the cabinet, and we have made clear when they take actions that we disagree with. We've made that clear publicly, and I can tell you we've had some very direct conversations privately as well with the senior members of the government of Israel about those policies that we think are unproductive, not only to the plight of the Palestinian people, but to Israel's security. Ultimately, though, it is not for us to pass judgment on who ought to be in the government of Israel or who ought to not be in the government of Israel, or into the cabinet. That's just not a decision for the United States to make. We don't decide who is in the cabinet of any other country. That is a decision for the people of Israel to make. Ultimately, what our job is to interact with whatever government they choose and make clear what we think the policies they should pursue that are in their best interest and the best interest of the region. And we're going to do that whoever is in the government. Now, that said, when we see decisions when we see decisions with which we disagree, we will not hesitate to make those disagreements known. And that has been true before the dissolution of the war cabinet, and it will continue to be true.
But I mean, no one's asking you to decide who's in the cabinet, but you frequently have views on members of other governments, and this is one of your closest allies. So
based on the policy decisions that they take, and so that's what I'm trying to speak to. When members of that government have made policy decisions with which we disagree, we speak out on those, and that will continue to be the case. That was the case before the war cabinet. It was the case when the war cabinet decided things that we didn't agree with, and that'll be our guiding principle going forward, no matter who is in the government, going one way or the other.
And do you have any policies or protocols on convicted terrorism supporters being in a key part of the decision making over a war being conducted by your ally in using U.S. military assistance?
Ultimately, we expect governments that receive U.S. military assistance to operate in line with international humanitarian law. That'll continue to be our expectation of Israel and everybody else.